Hello, listeners. Kathy Lawless, Life Story Curator, bringing you the podcast series, How Did I Get Here? A series of interviews designed for people just starting out in their careers, people in transition, or possibly feeling stuck, and giving them access to the stories of people who have been there, done that, so that they might be inspired with some new ideas, or maybe just comforted knowing they are not alone, that everybody starts somewhere and everybody goes through times of transition and times when they feel stuck. Today, I'm very excited to be interviewing Jeff Harry, who is the International Positive Psychology Play Speaker. Welcome, Jeff.
Hey, thanks so much for having me.
And this is going to be a really fun interview, obviously, because the word play is in your title. And I've talked with you before, and I know that the energy that you bring is going to be super fun. So, but listeners, I met Jeff through a fellow podcaster. And again, this is what I love about doing these podcasts is you start with one group of people and then they introduce you to another, and it's just great cascading effect. So, but Jeff has got a really cool story. So, but before we get into what it means to be an international positive psychology play speaker, Jeff, I like to ask the my icebreaker questions. So tell us where you grew up, what part of the country, how many in your family, so where were you in the birth order, and how do you think that shaped you as an adult?
Sure. So I grew up in the suburbs of Chicago. My father is from the Caribbean, St. Vincent off the coast of Barbados, just had a volcano there erupt. And then my mom's from the Philippines. So I'm Vincentian Filipino, and I am the youngest of three. And I have two older sisters that are both teachers. And I think how that shaped me is I am very aware of toxic masculinity because I had two older sisters that would call it out on a regular basis. So I feel much more like empathy, and I think I show up more with like feminine leadership traits, like play, like curiosity, like compassion, and a lot of the ones that I feel have made me successful have been because I've leaned towards those.
Yeah. So you kind of encompass both, right? You've got your natural masculinity, but then you've also got the femininity part.
Right. Which is like really amazing. I mean, when I see a New Zealand Prime Minister, Jacinda Ardern, like she is a perfect example of what a great leader does when they're able to both sit in their masculine and feminine power.
Yeah. It's about bringing both.
Right.
Both have value. Yeah. So what was the age difference? I'm just curious how the age gap.
So I think Shayna's 3 years older than me and Tanya's 4 years older than me.
Yeah. Oh, so a few years in between. Okay, yeah. Cool. And so what kind of activities did you do as a kid?
I just caused mischief. It was a lot of exploration, a lot of getting into like trouble, a lot of like, I would make potions. I would take my Johnson & Johnson shampoo bottle and put antifreeze in there and ants and Listerine and whatever liquids I could find, and then I would spray it on the lawn, and then my mom would get really angry at me. I did things like that. I was all about like experimenting. That was my type of play, where I was like, I wonder what's going to happen when I put my finger on this stove, and you're like, oh, that's what happens. Oh, okay, now I got a blister. So yeah, that was my way of playing. I got super bored, and then I would make up crazy games all the time.
Wow. Okay. So kind of in your own space, you weren't necessarily doing the whole sports thing, or were you doing that?
I mean, I did too. I also played soccer and baseball and all those other things. But what's ironic is I still make games now. And when I was a kid, and even when I was a teenager, when I didn't want to be cool, right, because it was so exhausting to be cool, I would be in my basement at 14, 15 years old, making up games. And then my friends would come over and play those games because they didn't want to, be cool as well. They couldn't afford Vidal Sassoon mousse for their hair. So they were like, why don't I just hang out in this basement with Jeff?
Of course, it sounds like we need to be careful about what products we use of yours, because there might be ants and antifreeze and
right, exactly.
all kinds of other crazy things in there. So, all righty. So, introvert or extrovert?
Extrovert, but I found that, like, especially during the pandemic, I think I'm an introverted extrovert. So I'm great with people and hanging out with people and seeing people, but also this is hasn't been that hard for me. I've been living alone the whole time, and I see my family from time to time. For the most part, those are the only people I've seen, and I'm doing pretty well as long as I'm like connecting people via like Zoom like this. It's been great.
Yeah, yeah. So it doesn't have to be in person for you. It can be via Zoom or yeah.
It's just like, it just has to be connection for me. Connection
Okay.
is what like makes my day. So, being that I'm a play guy, right? And I'm positive psychology in play, I'm constantly looking of like, how am I making more play, fun, and joyful moments? And a lot of them have to do with connection. So I'm always measuring my day based off of how deep of a connection I made that day and how many connections I made that day.
Wow. That's so interesting to think about when your mindset is about play and fun and connecting with people versus a lot of times it's about how am I going to make money and am I in the right job? And so okay, yeah. So the
Here's the ironic part. The more
yeah,
connections I make, the more money I make without the goal of pursuing. So I think a lot of times adults get really fixated on results, right? And expectations are the thief of joy. And it's weird how adults love to plan in a linear fashion. Like, I'm going to do this, and then I'm going to get here. When you look back at your life, none of it is linear. None of it is linear. So why are we planning so much of it? Like, if the pandemic taught you anything, if 2020 taught you anything, is that nobody knows what they're doing. We're all making it up as we go along. And the more we can actually be in the moment, the more we can actually be in our flow and actually play, the more opportunities you're going to be able to see. And a lot of the science backs this up.
yeah. Oh, I love that. I've heard that before about when you focus on the result of something, like if you focus on I want to win or I want to make money or it's really you need to focus on the basics or what are all of the steps that get you that result, not focus on the result. So
Right.
okay,
And
wow.
also there's the other part of pursuing the happiness in the result. So like when I make $1 million, and I'll be happy. When I get this client, then I'll be happy. So you're constantly chasing your worth, as Viola Davis says. Like, how many people do you know chasing their worth
Yeah.
instead of claiming who they are, right? And then look at people that have gotten everything, right? Like Michael Phelps had 23 Olympic gold medals, still went into depression. Anthony Bourdain did the job that everyone wants to do, travel the world and eat. It wasn't enough. So if you are fixated on the results bringing you happiness and that's your driver, that is a dangerous path. And the thing that will make you actually more successful is really figuring out, how do I enjoy this process? How do I enjoy this moment? How do I enjoy being an entrepreneur, a solopreneur? Because the reason you left the corporate world was you hated that life. So why are you? I know a lot of entrepreneurs that I coach that are still acting like they're working for corporations. They're still being mean and tough on themselves, when it's just like, dude, you can do whatever you want today. You are the boss. So you don't have to do it a certain way. Just figure out what way brings you the most joy, follow your zone of genius, and see where it takes you.
Yeah. Dude, where were you like 4 years ago, 5 years ago when I started my business? Because you're absolutely right. I put that corporate hat on myself as an entrepreneur. Like, oh, am I doing enough? What else do I need to be doing? What should I be doing? It's and it's
it
hasn't been until this year that I was just saying, it hasn't been until this year that I really started to embrace, what I've created this life where I get to bring my unique genius to the world. I'm meeting new people every day. I'm learning and growing. How great is that? And just living into that. And then where does it take me?
Right.
Versus the whole, well, I need to do this and I need that. And
Exactly. We have to realize that we've been primed to think this way. There's been so much shoulding on ourselves for so long. So when I tell a lot of people, when people ask me like, why do adults not play enough? I answer it with 148,000 no's. By the time you reach the age of 18, you've heard the word no approximately 148,000 times, according to certain studies, right? And then you go to school where you're told to raise your hand, you're told to ask for permission all the time. And then adults are constantly shooting on you. You should be a doctor. You should be a lawyer. You should be this. And you're like, I'm 6 years old. I don't know why you're giving me advice at 6, but you're like putting all this pressure on me. And then we get to our teenage years, and especially now for teenagers, you're inundated with so much social media or so much information. We get more information in a day now than people got in the 1950s in an entire year. And all that information, if you think about it, is telling you you're not enough. You need to buy more products to bring you happiness. And the last thing you should be doing is playing. The last thing. So the idea of you starting a podcast doesn't make sense. The idea of me making videos just for the sake of making videos doesn't make sense from an ROI standpoint. But you are listening to your own inner genius and your own weirdness. And just like, it's such a revolutionary act, a rebellious act to play, because society is telling you not to play and it's telling you not to be yourself.
Yeah. Well, and it's almost like when you show up somewhere, you almost have to tell the story of, oh, I'm working so hard, I'm so busy. The mantra of that versus just, oh no, what did you do today? Or what did you do this weekend? Nothing. Or I played.
Right.
Or I relaxed and I enjoyed it, I did nothing.
I used to travel all the time before the pandemic, and I would talk to people and they'd be like, what do you do for a living? And I'm like, I play for a living. And I tell them what I do, right? That I'm like building psychologically safe spaces through play and just playing around. And they were like, and you could tell some of them were really angry because they were like, what? I mean, at one point I was doing a job where I just played with Lego all the time. And they were like, what? That's a job? How is that a job? And it was both an anger of like, how are you doing that job? And then also an epiphany of like, I didn't know that was possible. I thought I needed to be miserable at my job. I thought I needed to rise and grind every day as an entrepreneur. And it's like, why are you grinding? Grinding is like wearing someone down. Why are you slaying the dragon? If I met a dragon, I wouldn't want to slay the dragon. I would want to hang out with it, maybe ride it, like have fun with this, right? We have one life. At the end of your life, or heck, like even at the end of the year, do you think about your most productive moments or all of the things you did? Or do you think about your most fun, joy, play moments? And if that is the case, why are we not focused on making more of those?
Yeah, absolutely. Well said. Well, we've already sort of touched a little bit on your, what are you doing today? But I have two other questions I need to fit in here because I think I like to see how they play out in your story. So first is on the fun meter scale of 1 to 5, 1 being couch potato, 5 being life of the party. Where do you put yourself?
Probably life of the party. Yeah. So Elizabeth Gilbert says when she walks into a room, she wants to be love in the room. Right. And I want to be play in the room. Like I want to embody play. And she also says she wants to be the calmest person in the room because she finds, especially, this is what she was saying about women. She's like, you really rarely do you see someone calm. And I want to be calm. And then I want to give that permission to also be calm. And for me, I see play as the opposite of perfection. And perfection is rooted in like ego and shame and constantly trying to be right. And frankly, the people I get along with most are the shameless people. The people that are the first on the dance floor, the ones that do not care what other people have to say, the ones that are just there to have fun. So those are the people I gravitate towards. But I also realize by me playing, especially when I'm at a party or some function, is I'm giving other people permission to play as well. I wear this bow tie almost to remind myself not to take myself too seriously, but then also it communicates to everyone else. You don't have to take yourself seriously when you talk to me either. Like you don't need to tell me your resume. I don't really care what you do for a living because I don't think that's a good question to ask someone because it actually doesn't really tell you the story of them. The story I want to know is like, what is the weirdest thing about you? What is the time when you were so scared and you still did the adventure anyway? Tell me that. Tell me that story, right? Yeah. Tell me the last time you took a massive risk that felt like you shifted your life. You can ask that to a random stranger and they'll be like, thank goodness, I'm glad I'm going to answer this question instead of again, like, what do I do for a living? Ugh. And here's my resume in business card form.
Yeah. And oh, by the way, when we asked that, what do you do for a living? We wanted it in a small snippet that we understand, right?
Right.
Like, we're not really looking for the whole story, but you're
people
right.
Are not even listening while you're saying it. So I'm just like, I mean, we might as well just make it up, so yeah.
Okay. On the risk meter, same scale, 1 to 5, 1 being low, 5 being high. Where do you put yourself?
Oh, 5.
5. So you're 5 on. Yeah.
And the reason why is like, and I'm quoting, "We bought a zoo," by the way, but he said it, in the movie, like, all you need is 20 seconds of insane courage, 20 seconds of sheer bravery, and anything can change. Everything can change. We're always one risk away. So I think about that each day. I actually track my risks. I sometimes go back into my emails or into my calendar. I've been doing it this week to be like, what was my risk that day? Or did I make multiple risks? And the reason why I do that is because when you're taking a risk, you are getting comfortable being in that like pool of uncertainty. You're on the deep end of the pool. And then you realize that it's not that big of a deal. So, when you actually reach out to that person you've been putting off for the past 6 months, when you create that video that you're scared to like share with the world, when you start that podcast, what you're doing is you're expanding what is possible, which ironically enough will also make your business more successful, because then again, you're putting yourself out there more. Last year, what is it? Elizabeth, I'm obsessed with Elizabeth, so I'm quoting her a lot today. But I read this article and she said, personal transformation doesn't happen until you get tired of your own BS, right? So for your listeners, what BS are you telling yourself? In March of 2020, I was telling myself, I don't have time to make videos. I have no time. I sound stupid in videos. I look stupid in videos. I just don't want to do videos, but mostly I don't have any time. And then March 15, 2020 happened. And it was just like, yo, quarantine, you have all the time in the world, Jeff. What are you going to do? And at first I just binge watched Netflix because I'm like, I don't want to do those videos. But then finally I confronted my own BS and was like, let me play through this and let me just make one video. It's just one. And then like, no one's going to watch it anyway. And then let me make another one. And I ended up making 150 videos between March and December. And then it gave me the bravery to hop on podcasts and do interviews. And then all of a sudden I found myself on 120 podcasts by the end of December. All of that because I took one risk, which then causes a ripple to take more and more risks. Yeah. That's why risk is so important to me.
Wow. Well, I think that's the most amazing and elaborate, but really cool answer I've gotten to that question. A lot of people are, they're talking about, professional risk, personal, am I an adrenaline junkie, or, how do I take risks? And, but I really love how you break that down, and that how one little step then took you to the next. And if you keep track of them, I like that, keeping track.
And the risks could be something as simple as like asking for help. They don't have to be grandiose, big risks. It's like, what is a risk for you? What is something that will get you out of your comfort zone? Because that's the point. The point is the comfort zone, you're being limited by it, right? And you can't make money if you're binge watching Netflix all the time. But if you were like, okay, let me reach out to someone that I've been wanting to reach out to. Oh, that wasn't that bad. I can do that. And you do it more and more. And you're like, oh, rejection isn't actually that bad. I applied to 350 podcasts last year. I was on like 130 of them. A lot of people never got back to me. Some people were like, nope, not a good fit. But after a while, you were like, I don't really care. I've already moved on. Like once you get rejected enough, like here's the problem. And this is really helpful for entrepreneurs. When we first get rejected, it hurts so much. And the reason why is because we're waiting for the result of that. But if you reach out to like 100 businesses, right? By the way, there's about 3 million businesses that have like a staff of above 20 people. So, if you work with businesses, there's plenty of businesses out there for you. But yeah, if you reach out to a business and then by the time they get back to reject you, you've already reached out to like 50 more, you won't really care about that result.
It's no big deal.
It's
no big deal.
You're like, oh, it's just one of the other ones. That's fine. Because again, you're just culling down the list and you're trying to find the people that most resonate with you anyway. So me, ironically enough, going on all these podcasts and making all these videos that I made attracted customers to me and clients, not because I wanted them to, but simply because I was putting myself out in the world. I was putting my digital flag out in the world, right? My green flag, so that people can find me. And I think a lot of entrepreneurs and solopreneurs, when they first start, is they built the business and then they're like, where's everybody? Are people coming? When are they going to come? And it's just like, dude, you got to get out there. Yeah. How are they going to figure you out? How are they going to find you?
Yeah. So are you using the term entrepreneur versus entrepreneur, or am I just hearing that part?
Oh, no, no, I'm using entrepreneur,
Entrepreneur. Okay.
solopreneur,
Well,
but I mean, I can slip in entrepreneur as well, or
well, I
playpreneur.
thought
You know,
no,
I
I
like
thought
them
maybe
all.
you had coined a phrase and that was part of what you
I
were.
mean,
Um,
I might just have without even realizing it. Look at the things that were happening. You
'Cause
know.
that's what I was hearing, and I'm like, wow, because maybe that is, because many times you get into being an entrepreneur because of a creative space or a
Uh-huh.
sense, a space you want to be in that's different than where you've been before. So
Right,
anyway,
right.
okay, well, I just wanted to clarify that. So, well, okay, Jeff, you've already kind of shared quite a bit about who you are as a being, but tell us what it means, a little bit about what your role is or your company, about being an international positive psychology play speaker,
Yeah, sure. So,
which is
what
quite
do
a long title, by the way.
I mean, yeah, it is quite a long title. So I run an organization called Rediscover Your Play, where I help companies build psychologically safe workspaces using play. So we use play to tackle really difficult issues like how to navigate difficult conversations, how to deal with toxicity at work, how to tackle your inner critic, which I'm happy to explore, how to get your staff in flow. And then when I'm not doing that, I work a lot of times with entrepreneurs and solopreneurs, right? And playpreneurs with how do you get out of your own way? How do you use play as a way to change the way in which you market, change the way in which you recruit, change the way in which you run your businesses so you enjoy the process throughout this, you know, this adventure that you're about to go on. Because if you're really not enjoying the process, what's the point? And also when you're enjoying the process, you actually do more great work, because when you're actually in your flow state, you're 500% more productive.
Yeah. Yeah, I've seen the statistics on that, and which sounds funny, right? The statistics of being in flow or the statistics of play. But yeah, this notion of play, it's funny. My sister just started painting during the pandemic,
Mm-hmm.
and on a canvas, and really trying to apply her creative nature. And she watched a lot of YouTube videos, and one of the things that really resonated with her to get out of that inner critic mode was that, well, just play with this technique. So you
Yeah,
play with using this type of a brush, play with using this type of paint, play with, and so when she plays, you should see the outcome of some of what she's created. Yet when
exactly.
she was trying to
Right.
paint something in a way that looked like, certain, I mean, she was just, she was frustrated, not having any fun with it. And now she's been inspiring my other sister who wants to paint. And then we had a girls' weekend, and anyway, she was inspiring me to paint too. And I really had a hard time with playing with it
Uh-huh.
versus like,
Trying
no,
to
I'm
be
trying to
perfect.
create a certain thing. And that inner
Right.
critic was really
Yeah,
coming
it
ahead.
can get really loud. And I am trying to think of which way I want to go with this. But yeah, I was working with a client who was having a lot of trouble with their business and trying to figure out, like, I feel stuck here. I don't know about this. I'm trying to figure out all these answers. And I was like, what do you like to do? And she's like, I like to garden. I was like, all right, go garden. She's like, well, that's not going to figure out the answers. Just go garden, And as she started putting her hands in the soil and started, all of a sudden the ideas started coming. All of a sudden the answers started coming. So again, a lot of times we're constantly trying to force it. I think
Mhm.
the society, especially, the hustle grind culture is like, you gotta force it. You gotta work 60, 80 hours a week. And that's how you're gonna, and sometimes that is the case, but sometimes don't force it, right?
Yeah.
Start doing something to get you out of your head. And that sometimes is the greatest thing you can do to actually free yourself to figure out the next answer.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember at a point when I was at that, well, I'd call it being in transition, but I remember I didn't like that term. So a friend of mine introduced a term called free agent. So what a better term, right? I was a free agent, which means I'm exploring and where am I going to go next versus I'm in transition, just didn't feel as powerful. So yeah, so
Right,
I was a
right.
free agent, but things weren't happening. And I was very frustrated. And I remember thinking, you know what, I'm just going to go paint. Well, I want to paint this one room in my house. I'm just going to go paint the room. And I put my phone downstairs, didn't even look at it, and just painted for a whole weekend, and then even into, I think, Monday, Tuesday,
Nice.
and really took my head out. And sure enough, what happened? Things started coming into my
Yep,
email, and I
yep,
wasn't checking it. And I remember
yep.
just being in that space of, oh, you know what? You just have to know that I did activity to get some result, but I just need to step out and really do things that are
Right.
going to make me happy. It doesn't do me any good to worry about it or keep
Right.
checking or trying to, I can't do anything else right now. So why not do
Right.
something?
Well, like worry is a waste of your imagination, right?
Mhm.
And because I'm going to stick on the Elizabeth Gilbert thing, just keep quoting her all day. But, I recently saw an interview where she goes, my full-time job is working on my mental health. And then my side business is I write. So I write on
Oh,
the side.
wow.
And like, if you think about it, that should be all of our jobs. If we're working on our mental health, our mindset, all that stuff, everything else would take care of itself. But instead, what we're trying to do is a lot of times we're trying to force when our mental health isn't in the right way, right? Like imagine when you reach out to people to try to get new business and you're like desperate for money. You can feel it in the emails. You can feel it in the phone calls. That's not a healthy way of approaching it. So instead, going for a walk, meditating, taking like a couple days off and just like getting grounded before you go and do those sales calls or reach out to those people via email might be the best thing you can do, rather than you being like, I need to contact 500 people and I got to do it in the next 2 days. And then you know what I got to do? I expect 100 people to get back to me, because then again, you're setting yourself up for failure. You're setting yourself up to be disappointed. You're setting, I saw a friend of mine recently launch her program, and she had built it up so much and expected so much from her just simply launching her program that the world would love it. And it was like, man, that's so much pressure you're putting on yourself. And when she simply was like, okay, I'm just going to open it up and then whoever wants to join it will join it, all of a sudden people started coming when she wasn't forcing it. So like, we have to do the work. So don't be lazy, do the work, but then let go and trust the universe that it's going to work out.
Yeah.
And just
Well,
see where that takes you, because the other version of that, of like doing the work, stressing out more, doing less work, stressing out more, it just not work. It doesn't help in the long run.
not at all. And it's very restrictive. And yeah, it's negative energy. You mentioned that Elizabeth Gilbert had said, building or working on my mental health. We never even talk about that. You know what I mean? You hear people, oh, I work out my physical, right? I worked out
Right.
today. I go to the gym. We have gyms for our physical, but where is the space to work on our mental health? I mean,
Exactly.
we have universities to work on our education and our academic mind and our intellectual, but we never really focus on that mental health.
Exactly. And then again, remember, a lot of like, part of like capitalism is to, get you to feel bad so you'll buy more stuff, right? So like that is what we're being fed all the time. So it is really difficult. We have to fight that. So when I tell people to play, here's one of the techniques I do that's really helpful is you can't play when you're in an anxiety-ridden state. You can't play when you're angry or sad, so you have to first identify what soothes you, like what calms you down. And I learned this from my play mentor, Gwen Gordon, that was, you actually adopt your nervous system in a way, the way in which you cope from the person that took care of you the most. So if that person didn't know how to soothe themselves or calm themselves down, then you might adopt that level of like historical trauma. So you have to be aware of that, right? And be like, okay, what are healthy ways in which I soothe myself? Well, when I take a shower, I have a bunch of ideas. When I go for a walk, I have a bunch of ideas. When I'm dancing in costume in my house, I have a bunch of ideas. So what is the thing that actually calms you down? What soothes you? And then the second thing that I challenge people to do, which is really hard in this society, is I challenge people to get bored, which is hilarious coming from a play guy. But what I mean by getting bored is stop binge watching Netflix, stop looking at social media. And I'm not talking about forever. I'm talking about 30 minutes to an hour. Like that's it. And if you're like, oh, I don't have time. I don't have time at all to do that. Look at your phone. You're on your phone 5 hours a day. You can find 30 minutes or an hour, right? You can even find 5 minutes. But then what happens once you get bored, your mind gets quiet. And when you get quiet, that's when you can hear your inner child. That's when you can hear your intuition. Because most of the time when we hear our inner critic, what are we hearing? We're hearing our rational mind, which is there just designed to keep you alive. So your rational mind is constantly warning you of all the dangers that are going to happen in the world. While your inner child, your intuition, that's where the creativity is. That's where the risk taking is. And we can't hear it because it's so noisy. But when you get really bored, all of a sudden that inner child, that intuition starts whispering things to you, and you get nerve-sighted, right? Nervous and excited because they suggest things that you're like, oh my gosh, I've never thought about that. Start that side business. Oh, I never thought about that. Create a podcast. Never thought about that. Make a video. I never thought about that. Reach out to that person that I've wanted to, my hero. Well, what are they going to say? You know, like, and by doing that, by pursuing those nerve-sighted ideas, you start to expand what's possible, and you start to play more. Because what is fear? Fear is false evidence appearing real. But when we actually pursue that risk amongst the fear, still being scared, right? Because courage is like doing it even when you're scared, right? Doing the act even when you're scared. All of a sudden, though, your world starts to expand, and you see all the possibilities that are out there instead of playing small, which a lot of society is telling us to do.
Yeah. Well, and you're so right. We keep ourselves so busy, right? I mean, you go to now that more restaurants are opening up, or if you're ever out in public, what are people doing? They're on their phones. They're not sitting there. Back in the day, right? There used to be a waiting room for, wherever you were at, and people would just be sitting there, or maybe they would pick up a magazine. But now everybody's on their phone. I mean, they're on their phone when they're in their car at a stoplight, because we have to have this. Yeah. So you're so right. There's this inflow of information.
And we have to remember why that's the way, right? There are people called attention engineers that designed many of the devices at casinos, like slot machines and all these other noise. And now they've been hired by all these apps. So it's designed to keep you addicted. Like that's their goal, to keep you on there all the time. And why do you keep looking at your phone? Because you're looking for connection. You're constantly looking for connection or validation, or did someone like my post, or am I great? Or, what's going on with this person? But then you start feeling bad the more and more you look at social media, because comparison also is a huge thief of joy.
Yep.
But the more you can actually allow yourself to get bored and you're not looking at it, all of a sudden you're not comparing yourself to somebody else. All of a sudden you're not being inundated with like people trying to like your posts, because that stuff's not relevant to you anymore. And then you start to realize, like, what do I actually want to create in this world? And that is the part I want to get to. Like Howard Thurman says, don't ask what the world needs, ask what makes you come alive. And what the world needs is for more people to come alive. That's what you want to do. You want to get bored so you can figure out what makes you come alive.
Oh, yeah. Wow. Very cool stuff. Man, we are like halfway through and we haven't even got to, the big question about how did I get here? So this has been fascinating though. I really appreciate where we've gone so far. But so you've already shared a little bit about being that young person, creating games, etc. So it sounds like games and creativity was a big part of your life and play back when you were junior high and high school. But what were you thinking as a young person you wanted as a career? I mean, did you think you could be in play?
Yeah, so I'll share the Batman origin story, and I'll get to the nitty gritty of it because that's what your listeners want. So do you remember the movie Big with Tom Hanks?
Oh yeah, I love that.
So I saw that movie as a kid, and Tom Hanks was dancing on a piano, and then he got offered a job to play with toys at a toy company. And I saw that in third grade, and I was like, that's a job? You can do that as a job? Oh, that's what I'm doing. So I went to FAO Schwartz and started dancing on a piano, and no one showed up and offered me a job. And I was super disappointed. So I went home and I started writing toy companies in third grade. What? And I just kept writing them. I wrote them all through my teenage years. I was spamming before spam was a thing. I was sending like 5 letters a day. I mean, it was ridiculous. My mom was like, I don't know what he's doing, but he's staying out of trouble. He's not making potions anymore. Thank goodness.
Thank God.
And then I finally got a letter from one company telling me to go into mechanical engineering when I was a sophomore. And I listened to them. I probably shouldn't have listened to them. And then I majored in mechanical engineering at Tufts University. And then I graduated and then went to New York because that's where all the toy companies were, and then continued to write toy companies until I got into the toy industry. And what's ironic is I wrote a letter to this one toy company telling them, I think it was Toys R Us at the time, and I was like, hey, you should open up your boxes and play with toys in the store because you'll sell more doing that. And that actually got me an interview for one of my first positions, and I started working for Toys R Us in their corporate office because of that, right? Like, because I took that risk and wrote that letter. And then I think 9/11 happened, and I was like, oh my gosh, I'm in a cubicle. Oh, I don't enjoy this. I don't want to die in a cubicle. So I stayed with Toys R Us, but then I went to Times Square and I helped them open up their flagship Toys R Us store that had a Ferris wheel inside and a T-Rex inside. And I played with toys as a product demonstrator. So the job that I had pitched 2 years ago, I was now doing, which was like totally weird and ironic, but it was another thing, right? So then eventually I tried to unionize that store. They didn't like that. And I left. And then I went to another toy company, Sega, and I worked for other toy companies, but I realized like toy companies were not fun, man. And I don't know if you've ever gotten exactly what you've always wanted, which I got in the toy industry, and they've been so disappointed when you get there. But like there was no fun. There was adults just being super mean to each other and just like, like, oh, it was just so bad. And I was like, what am I doing in a cubicle? So I remember having my quarter life crisis and being like, what am I going to do in the world? And leaving. And I remember reading a bunch of like Poe Bronson books about how to figure out what you want to do with your life, and Tony Robbins, or whatever I could do to like get myself out of my head, right? And then I remember coming across a company on Craigslist, which is like this, super shady website. And it was like teaching kids engineering with Lego. And I was like, oh my gosh, I want to do that. So it was only paying $150 a week. It was a joke of a job, but I joined it anyway. 7 nerdy people were there, but they were playing for a living. And I was like, I'm just going to do this for a little bit. But then as I was doing it, I was like, I love this because I get to play. So I was like, how do I make this a full-time job? So I went up to my boss. I asked him how to do it. He's like, I don't know, figure it out. And I figured it out. And what happened is we ended up taking the company from 7 people to 400 people. It became the largest Lego-inspired STEM organization in the US. But we did it all by playing. Like we had no idea what we were doing. No business plan. We picked cities we thought were fun. We picked people we thought were fun. We failed miserably all the time, but we just kept trying stuff out. And then all of a sudden we got big enough that we were teaching about 100,000 kids a year. And we had taught about 1 million kids in the first like 10 years, that Silicon Valley showed up and was like, hey, do you do team building events? Of course we do. No, we didn't. No, we didn't.
We do now. We do now.
Just said yes to everything. Exactly. We were just like, we'll figure it out. We'll do. You want us to come to your conference? Sure, we'll build something. I don't know how to do it, but we'll figure it out. And all of a sudden, for the next decade, I was running special events and team building events for the top tech companies in the world: Facebook, Google, Adobe, PayPal, Netflix, all of them, right? And then what was ironic was I found that these top organizations that talked about innovation and disruption and risk taking and all these buzzwords, in the teams that I worked with, or did team building events with, weren't doing that stuff. They weren't doing any of that stuff, and they weren't playing. So then I, left the Lego thing and I created Rediscover Your Play to tackle those, and create that psychological safety, right? By tackling hard conversations, by navigating and mediating how to have like that thing you're scared to talk about with someone else, by addressing inner critic stuff, by getting your staff in flow, like by addressing that person that starts with the letter A, that toxic person at work, right? That a-hole, right? So like, yeah, all of those things, because I was like, you can use play to tackle really serious issues. and really make it a more enjoyable place for people to work, because that's what I had just enjoyed for the last 15 years of my life. And I was like, now I want to do that for other people and other organizations.
Wow. Wow. So it started with an engineering degree, it sounds like, but there's a big part of psychology involved. So do you have
So
a psychology minor or?
So no, at one point I worked with the Flourishing Center, or and got like a certification and did a lot of studying and got a coaching, like background in it to be a positive psychology like play coach, specifically because up until the time when I was running team building events, I didn't have the language to talk about what was actually going on in their head. So positive psychology provided me the language to be like, what is happening in your brain when you're in flow, right? When you're going from a beta state to a flow state, which I'll just briefly touch upon, because what's actually going on is your brain's going through something called Hypno Frontality, where a part of your prefrontal cortex is actually shutting down and your inner critic gets really quiet and it starts to dissipate. And then you become highly curious and you get the shot of dopamine. And then all of a sudden you become highly interested in what's going on. And you see all these opportunities in front of you instead of just being fixated on one result. And then also what happens to your brain, it starts to distort time. So when you're doing something that you truly love and you're fully like alive, you forget about time because you're in flow. It's actually a distorting time in your mind. So when you're in that flow state, that's why you're so productive, is because your inner critic has now disappeared and you start to see all these connections you didn't see before, right? So the more we can actually play, the more we create the opportunity to be in a flow state. Yeah, so Dr. Csikszentmihalyi, the doctor of flow, would talk about this flow chart that he had, where when you don't have a lot of skill, especially when you first start a job or when you start your business, right? You have low skill, but the challenge is hard. So you have a lot of anxiety because you're like, I don't know if I can do this. Oh my gosh, imposter syndrome, right? But when you have a lot of skill and the challenge isn't that hard, then you become really bored. So, but between anxiety and boredom is the flow state. It's when the challenge perfectly meets the skill set. And that is what's happening when you are constantly taking risks. You are putting yourself out there to take on a really hard challenge, and then you have to up your skill set to meet that challenge. And that's when you're truly in flow. So the more we're willing to take risks, the more we're willing to play, the more likely we're going to get into flow.
Wow. Wow. So funny. You're all about play, but you're very serious about play.
I mean, well, I'm just very like analytical.
Yeah.
I've looked at it enough to
Yeah.
understand like there's a lot that's going on there. Like here's another suggestion for your listeners. I start my day with play. I actually positively prime my day by starting off by like making a TikTok video to start my day, because it frames my day through the eyes of play. And then I learned this from my friend Desiree, who asked this really curious question: how can it get any better than this? So whenever something good happens or even something bad happens, you ask with curiosity, ooh, how can it get any better than this? So this morning, I what did I do this morning? I wrote to some horror. Ooh, how can it get any better than this? Then I made this TikTok video. Ooh, how can it get any better than this? Then I interviewed with this possible podcast I might be on for DEI. Oh, it was such a great conversation. Ooh, how can it get any better than this? Now we're having this conversation. Oh my gosh, how can it get any better than this? My friend Steven and I are going to brainstorm nerdy ways of making fun of corporate jargon, right after this. Oh, how can it get any better than this? And I start stacking all these positive priming moments by simply asking this question: how can it get any better than this? Now, what happens when people have bad days? I challenge them that they had a bad day. I say, you didn't have a bad day. You had a bad moment. And then you ruminated about that bad moment. You languished in that bad moment, and you primed your mind to look for the next bad moment, because your brain is just constantly looking for patterns, right? And if you want to break that cycle, simply asking with curiosity, not with yearning, but with curiosity, how can it get any better than this? You can shift your day and then potentially shift your life.
Yeah, totally. Totally. Because you get in that mindset of, you made it mean something. What did it mean that I had a bad moment versus just I had a bad moment? And then
Right.
it becomes a thing. And then, like you said, then you start looking for it. Wow.
And then you're curious about it, and that's where the inner critic stuff comes in. So
Mhm.
like, just to tap into this a little bit, because I know we don't have that much time, is like, so you want to address your inner critic. I'll do the speed round of how to do this, right? So you got to remember, your rational mind is there to keep you alive. And a lot of times we run to our rational mind to answer questions that we shouldn't be asking it. Like, hey, should I start a business? Hey, what should I do with my business? Your rational mind is there to be like, don't take any risks. So we need to stop looking to our rational mind and look to our intuition and because that's where the creativity is, right? So when you feel really crappy about yourself, what's happening is your inner critic has been whispering to you for like the last hour, all these mean things. So my challenge to you, and I learned this from my friend Marsha Chandor, is write down what your inner critic is saying. So either write it on a piece of paper or write it on your computer or type it on your phone, but write down as soon as you feel crappy, what is it saying? Oh, you're a loser. You're always going to be broke. Your business is going to suck. No one loves you, blah, blah, blah. No one cares. Like, write it all down. And as you write it down, you start to make yourself actually aware. You start to recognize that it's a different voice than yours, right? And then you can ask yourself the question, well, what does this inner critic look like? What does this inner critic sound like? Is it a bully from third grade? Is it my aunt and uncle that was shitting on me all the time? Is that first horrible boss I had? Like, who is it? And then you assign a character to it. And I use the word character specifically because you're trying to separate it from you. You're trying to identify that this is a voice from the past. This is an old story that is trying to protect me. So my character, my inner critic, is Gargamel from the Smurfs. He would suck all the joy and life out of everything. And Gargamel's always like, you're broke, you're going to be a loser, you suck, no one loves you. And then I can turn to Gargamel and be like, actually, Gargamel, my bank account's doing pretty well. Actually, Gargamel, I'm surrounded by people that love me. And you can start to talk to it and give love to it, not push it away, but actually give it attention. And you can be like, listen, you can be in the car, but you can't be driving the car anymore, right? And another thing I sometimes do is I'll text my best friend Dana and I'll be like, Gargamel's saying these mean things to me right now, right? And as soon as I text her, she doesn't even have to write me back. But as soon as I text her, it also gets quiet. And then the best thing after that is then you look at that list of all the mean things Gargamel said or that inner critic said, and then you start to flip them. Oh, I'm going to be broke. Actually, I'm going to be extremely successful. Oh, my business is going to fail. Actually, my business is going to flourish. And when you start to say these things to yourself and you start saying that mantra to you, right? All of a sudden, you're giving more power to your inner child so you can hear it, and you're giving less power to your inner critic. And then, dude, that's when the ideas just start to show up. And that's when you can get into flow because, again, your inner critic is getting quiet, which is allowing the flow to show up.
Wow. Well, Jeff, this has been so powerful. Thank you. Those are such great words there. Normally I would end with, a couple follow-up questions, but we're out of time and I know you need to scoot off to another meeting. So I think that's just a perfect way to end is how do you deal with that inner critic? Because when you are someone, just starting out in your career, or if you're in transition, looking for that next thing or feeling stuck, it is that inner critic that is such a big part of what's holding you back a lot of times. Many times, even if you may not be as stuck as you think you are, if you can get that inner critic voice, it's someone else. And then it's almost like you're proving to that someone else not to, which then ends up being yourself. But yeah, totally.
And I'll say this last bit, this also really helps a lot of the clients that I work with is here's another way in which you can rediscover your play, right? So reach out to 3 to 5 of your closest friends or clients, if you have really great clients, and ask them these 2 questions. What impact have I had on your life? Like, why are we friends? Like, what have I done for you? So what impact have I had on your life? And then second, when have you seen me come most alive? And when you and that's based off the Howard Thurman quote of like, don't ask what the world needs, right? Ask what makes you come alive, because the world needs you to actually come alive. So when you ask that question, what impact have I had on your life? And when have you seen me come most alive? And you get the answers from 3 to 5 different people, you start to be like, oh my God, I didn't even realize that's how I impact your life. I didn't even realize that is how I show up and become alive. I haven't done that in years. And when you get those answers, then you reach back out to those same friends and you're like, help me to play more in those ways. And that opens up so many other opportunities, not only just in your life, but also in your business. So try that out. Let me know if it works for you, but I'm telling you, it's gonna do something pretty amazing and create a brand new adventure that you didn't even think was possible.
Yeah, a brand new adventure and a brand new connection to those three. I mean, you're going to find out something about yourself. I've done that before with a Pinnacle gift class that I went to, asking that same thing. And some of it I was surprised by, some of it I wasn't, and some of it I just wasn't giving myself any credit for what I was bringing and the impact I was having. So awesome. Well, Jeff, thank you so much. This has been such a great, fun way, a playful way for me to start my day. And I have taken away so many different nuggets that I'm going to implement. So, and that critic, I'm going to come up with my character. I don't know who
Come up with your character. I mean, I've got people have said Frank Frugal, Tila Tequila, mean Mary. Like, it's interesting. Painful Penelope. Like, when you find out that you have a board of directors of inner critics. It's not just one. It's many.
You have a whole set of characters.
To identify the different ones that are showing up, and then you're like, oh, hi, how are you? You can sit over there now. And the more you do that, the less you become stressed and the more you're likely to play.
Yeah. And again, you can't get rid of them. They're in the car, but they're not driving the car. And
Exactly.
So very cool. All righty. Well, we'll have to wrap up. We could keep going all day, I know, but we're going to wrap up here. So listeners, if you enjoyed today's interview, please subscribe below and you'll be alerted to other interviews as they're published. If you have any questions for me or for Jeff, you can find me on lifestorycurator.com, and I'll post this interview on my blog page, and I'll also post Jeff's social media so you can find him. So should you want more information about Jeff or have him come into your organization, or just sounds like as a personal coach, he's available in all of those ways to help people. So on that note, let's stay safe, stay well, and keep sharing those stories.
Thanks so much.